We got a couple clips actually here, guys, that are pretty funny. Conservative media is totally turning on Nikki Haley. Before we get into the Tucker one, I wanted to go for some even lower hanging fruit here first and quickly show you guys this clip of none other than Steve Bannon, who apparently is still relevant.
Sloppy Steve.
Yeah, Sloppy Steve, sounding the alarm on Nikki Haley.
You don't love Nikki? Neocon Nikki? Neoliberal neocon Nikki? You don't love her? She's ambitious as Lucifer. You're going to see.
One actually went dead.
You watch. Mark my words. We're going to have to stop that. That viper over there, that'd be worse than Judas Pence in the West Wing, wouldn't it?
This is just embarrassing. What are they even chanting? It's not loud enough to pick it up.
They're saying Tucker.
Oh, Tucker. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell if they were saying like.
Yeah, dude, I think they want Tucker to be vice president, which is
that's not going to happen. But that's hilarious.
No, it's definitely not going to happen. I think Tucker's far more interested in being a media figure than being
all those
Trump's
texts
lackey.
came out where he was really mean to Trump, and I don't think Trump forgot about that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, clearly they've made some sort of a deal, some sort of an alliance,
For sure.
they've decided to put that whole beef aside, at least for now. But yeah, I doubt that. First of all, I doubt that Tucker would want to be vice president. I also think that, ironically, Nikki Haley would make a much better vice president than someone like Tucker Carlson, who's obviously incredibly divisive himself, right? Trump needs to kind of balance out the super controversial aspects of his personality with someone that is a little bit more uniting, a little bit more centrist, or at least that's considered centrist or moderate in the Republican Party, someone like Nikki Haley. So even though it would certainly piss off the Steve Bannons and Tucker Carlsons of the world, I actually do think if Trump picked someone like Nikki Haley, much like him picking someone like Mike Pence, I do think that it would kind of calm down some of the Republican voters out there that might be scared to vote for Trump again. But the presence of someone like Haley would, again, kind of calm them down. And they would be like, well, Nikki will keep him under control. She'll make sure nothing crazy happens again. So I actually think it would be smart for him to pick someone like Nikki Haley, even though I don't think it's going to happen. And there are reports out there that Trump is asking allies about the possibility of Nikki Haley for vice president. So despite the fact that, she's kind of nipping at his heels a little bit in the polls, I think Trump understands that she's not a real threat to him. And potentially, he is impressed by the fact that she's done as well as she has done in this primary process, leading her to think, well, maybe it is worth poaching that kind of talent, even if their differences seem insurmountable, they're really not. You guys might remember it was Donald Trump himself that appointed Nikki Haley as the ambassador to the UN. So, apparently they're not too far apart.
No, for sure. I think it would be smart for him to do that. I think it would have like minor consequences for his base among the TP USA kind of crowd, the Sloppy Steve crowd in the war room. They would consider it a horrible decision, kind of like we laid out there. But I still think it's going to be Kristi Noem because I think that she checks the woman box for him. She is she's kind of like, she's known enough, but she's not widely known. She's not as big of a national political figure as Nikki Haley. And again, I think it'll come down to either her or Nikki Haley, but I'm just a little skittish that Donald Trump's going to pull the trigger and pick somebody who he thinks could potentially take the wheel and try and upstage him.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agree with you. I also think that Trump really just wants someone that's as loyal as possible. And even if the data proved that Nikki Haley would be a better choice for him electorally, I think he would still go with a loyalist and a sycophant like Kristi Noem, because ultimately, at the end of the day, he doesn't want another Judas Pence moment to happen if it comes down to that. But let's take a look also at this clip. Speaking of Tucker, this was pretty funny. Him and Tim Pool, I guess, were doing some sort of a live event, and they got into Nikki Haley. They are not amused about Nikki Haley. In fact, in this clip, they even threatened to not vote for Donald Trump at all if he were to make Nikki Haley his vice president, which I don't believe at all, but we'll get into that in a second.
Trump, would you vote for Trump if he chose Nikki as VP? And
would you guys vote for Trump? Well, that's the question that I asked you specifically.
Well, I would not only not vote for that ticket, I would advocate against it as strongly as I could.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's just poison. I mean, here's someone who's actively opposed to the interests of the country I grew up in, who endorsed the BLM riots, and who is not only is not left, but is neoliberal in the darkest, most, speaking of nihilistic way, and has no real popular support. Is a creature of the oligarchs. So yeah, that would be reason to oppose the ticket.
Even Trump.
Bro, is Tucker popping zins over there? I know that Tucker's been a nicotine stan his whole career. I'm like, bro, this guy's popping zins. He's trying to get down with the millennials, the Zoomers, all those guys that want to hang out on the golf course and pop their zins and vote for Donald Trump. Anyway, he's one of you, bro.
Nikki Haley.
He would get assassinated immediately if that were the case.
Yeah, and by the way, I just can't imagine a world where that could happen. That would be.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I honestly don't know what to make of that. Trump would be assassinated immediately if Nikki Haley, by who? One of your crazy
in the
listeners?
polling numbers, but he just said that, he'd be assassinated immediately. I don't know about that, pal.
So crazy. I mean, anything could happen, of course, but picking Nikki Haley, who's utterly treacherous and utterly dismissive of the interests of Americans. Yeah.
It's a no-go for me, but it's a yes for BlackRock.
LOL. Utterly treacherous.
Would you vote for Trump if he chose?
So that's pretty funny.
Corporate interest, Tucker Carlson. That's a man that's never hung out with anybody that was at all corporate. In fact, I'm sure the Tucker Carlson network will be independently financed exclusively by listeners, corporate free media.
Yeah, and it's not like Trump was some enemy of big business either, right? Like one of his key accomplishments, quote unquote, was massive deregulations. What was his rule? For every one new regulation, you have to get rid of 2 pre-existing regulations. That's a wet dream for corporate America. Are you fucking kidding me? But yeah, now BlackRock hates Trump.
He literally appointed a head of the Environmental Protection Agency that had previously been on record as saying that he didn't think the Environmental Protection Agency deserved to exist.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I just have to say, I do not buy it for a single second that even if Donald Trump picked Nikki Haley as his vice president, that all of a sudden Tucker Carlson and Tim Pool would abstain from advocating for that ticket. You know what I'm saying? All of a sudden they would become so principled that not only would they not support Trump anymore, but they would start, arguing for other people to not support the ticket either, just because of Nikki Haley. Bullshit. You guys would 100% go along with it. You guys would do propaganda for it because that's what your audience wants to hear. At the end of the day, you're not going to miss out on all the money that would come from capitalizing on that rabid pro-Trump audience that you've cultivated. And, they might not like Nikki Haley being picked as VP. It would certainly take them a couple weeks, maybe a month or 2 even to get over it. But ultimately, yeah, you guys would all support Donald Trump and Nikki Haley on a ticket together, if that's what it came down to, in my opinion. Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Again, because it just goes back to the point. It's not about politics. It's not about policy. When we analyze a situation, we are constructively looking at, okay, what does this person support? What's their voting record? Who are they taking financing from? Right? We try and be a little bit calculating with it. And let's look for the best situation that we can find. Sometimes it blows up in our faces. We'll be like, well, Fetterman is pretty good on $15 minimum wage. And then he just becomes an absolute fucking disaster. But it is at least rooted in our scrutinizing the policies that these people have done, and then being willing to alter our opinion as new information becomes presented to us. What happens with this is that they're just going to right now they're going to be like rah. I genuinely believe they're trying to push Trump in a direction that's not Nikki Haley. That I accept. But if he does go in that Nikki Haley direction, they're going to act like they never said this. and they're going to keep pushing him and say it's the last. It's almost like a reverse move that the Democrats will do. It's like they'll put up some schlob that nobody wants, like Joe Biden, and then they'll say, "Don't worry, like this is it's a democracy. It's just the most important election of your life." The Republicans will do that too. They will do that too, and it will be moderately effective to their base, just like it's moderately effective. It's probably more effective for the Democratic base than it is the Republican base. They're more likely, I think, to stay home. But as far as the actual commentators who butter their bread with content about Donald Trump, they're going to fucking get on board with the guy. They're going to get, look, how relevant is Ann Coulter right now, Gavin? How relevant is Ann Coulter? No, she put her foot down.
Very relevant.
The ball. She tried to hold him accountable. The conservative movement doesn't want their politicians to be held accountable. They want them to be revered. They want them to be celebrated. They want them to be, pat on the ass with baby powder. Okay? That's the reality.
This one's actually about Ron DeSantis. It's a clip from the same interview or live event or whatever with Tucker and Tim Pool, and they're getting into Ron DeSantis here instead of Nikki Haley. I thought this one was really interesting. Tucker taking a huge shot, interestingly, not so much at Ron DeSantis, but at his supporters. Let me know if you find this interesting, Zach, because it seems like Tucker's kind of hesitant to actually go after Ron DeSantis himself or to criticize Ron DeSantis himself, but he has quite the harsh words here for supporters of Ron DeSantis, which is interesting because not even like a year or so ago, Tucker seemed like he was flirting with supporting DeSantis. But anyway, let's take a look here. I thought this was pretty amusing.
Can I just ask a question, since you all are so on the internet and like I'm not that much? You really get the sense that Ron DeSantis, who I liked as governor, the people who represent him online are the nastiest, the stupidest, and the most zero-sum people I've ever seen in my life. And I don't think that reflects him, but it's like, this is kind of small ball. And by the way, these purported conservatives, Ron DeSantis changed his view, and I like him. Okay, I think he's been a good governor. I just want to be clear about that. I know him personally. I like him. But his donor, Ken Griffin, told him to change his view on Ukraine from it's a regional conflict we shouldn't get involved in to it's a super important thing, we should send more money. One donor got him to change his view, and all these so-called conservatives are supporting that like it's the most important thing ever. Like, who are these people, and what is their problem? Like, what is going on with them?
It does reflect on Ron, because Ron should have fired the people running his campaign a long time ago. Look, I respect that he wanted to launch his campaign on X, on Twitter Spaces.
Yeah, I
at the time.
agree.
It was a fucking disaster.
And
Yeah, dude, that
honestly, one of the most humiliating things we've ever gotten to react to. One, it was an absolute clusterfuck. Two, was when the whole world decided that we were ready to just collectively hate Elon Musk because he's a fucking dork, to say the least. No, not only that, mired with technical difficulties, absolutely unsubstantive, and left no impact on the broader media landscape, right? It was such a fucking anticlimactic thud. I was like, wow. It's almost like a lefty had launched that campaign. It was like, wow, it happened and nobody gave a shit. But yeah.
Yeah, dude, I remember we were reacting live on air and all the technical difficulties started happening. I was like, shit, usually the technical difficulties are coming from our end. But I think this is actually the world's richest man and his newly acquired platform fucking this up, not us.
And David Sachs.
Yeah, David Sachs awkwardly like, oh, I think we're overloading the servers. We broke the internet, guys. LOL.
So many people are so excited for what Ron DeSantis has to say. You're speaking to the world right now, Mr. DeSantis. What do you have to say? Well, I have to say I'm running for president of the United States because we're going to take back our country. Okay, from the fascists, from the woke mobs, from the jabbers, and we're going to be free again. And I'll tell you what we're going to do is we're not going to stand for the way that things have been. No, we're not. We're going to start something new, just like what we've done in Florida. We've created a conservative bastion. We're going to take that bastion of conservatism to the rest of the fucking country, man. Yeah. Florida. Yeah, it didn't work. The people weren't ready for that. They were not ready for the message.
One last piece of horse race news that I wanted to cover, and also another prediction I want to double down on real quick. So Nikki Haley surges in poll to within 4 points of Republican leader Trump in New Hampshire. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley has polled within 4 percentage points of Trump in New Hampshire's 2024 presidential primary, a contest which could prove closer than expected for the ex-president. And an American Research Group Inc. poll released on Thursday, which had asked voters whom they preferred in the New Hampshire primary scheduled for January 23rd, Haley earned 29% support to Trump's 33. So that's actually, in striking distance there. She has about a month to make up the ground to potentially take New Hampshire from Donald Trump. I have two questions for you, Zach. One, do you think there's any chance that this happens? And two, do you think that we see Ron DeSantis drop out before New Hampshire in order to endorse Haley and try to solidify the anti-Trump vote behind her in a last-ditch effort to, get the momentum on her side necessary to actually wrangle the nomination out of Donald Trump's hand on a, national electoral stage?
I won't say it's impossible. I won't say it's an impossibility. I think I'm still in the camp where I find that unlikely because of what Ron DeSantis has fucking tried to accomplish. I guess that's how all fucking runs for office typically end, especially when you're talking about a robust, party primary for presidency. You do just endorse the other person. So that would make sense, right? That would be logical. And then potentially Nikki Haley would beat Trump in New Hampshire, which I definitely don't think is off the table. I think even without a Ron DeSantis endorsement, it's not off the table that Nikki Haley makes up 5 points and narrowly by a hair takes New Hampshire, right? And that would kind of start a wave through, but I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's going to be enough unless the entire Republican Party coalesces behind Nikki Haley and they decide that's their lady and they do Barack Obama calls Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and all this stuff. And they're like, after South Carolina, Joe's our guy. All right, Joe's our guy. If they did that, I'm not saying it would work. That's their only shot at beating Donald Trump at this point. And I think it's a better shot. Honestly, Nikki Haley is taking off more than I thought she would. And general election polling still has Donald Trump up a meaningful amount. But the way that historically this worked is that if you started to win in early primaries, other people would be like, oh, wait, this is actually possible. Somebody else can win if you just vote for them, because in America, we get so force fed by the media, all this information. It's this is the person that's going to win. It's de facto nominee, Donald Trump, de facto nominee, Joe Biden. If you throw a wrench in that and you say, hey, man, actually you could have this guy, I think a lot of people are going to start to look at it. And again, I think that, Nikki Haley is a fucking soulless ghoul. I think that she's a horrible person. I don't agree with her on almost any political issues. I think if you did our Venn diagram, it would be really small. And it's do you think oxygen should be free? It's yes. Okay, let's move back from there. You know what I mean? So not that this is a person that I have a lot of political agreements with, but I do think it would be compelling to the American electorate to be given an alternative option outside of MAGA Republican, outside of Joe Biden Democrat, and say, hey, do you want to vote for this person in the primary? The Democrats absolutely are basically not even having a primary, right? They've done everything that they possibly could. Joe Biden's not even going to be on the ballot in New Hampshire to discredit the process of that, primary. He's not even going to have an election in Florida, right? So he's done everything he can to be as anti-democratic as possible. Ironic, given it's the Democratic Party, but they've always flying in the face of their own advertising. I think that people would be compelled to that, even though I don't know if it'll be quite enough to get her across the finish line. I think it's going to be really hard to, beat Donald Trump in a Republican primary. It just is. It's definitely a potentiality. And honestly, boy, wouldn't that stir the pot if Ron DeSantis drops out and endorses Nikki Haley? Then we have a real race. Then we have what we call an old ball game on our hands, pal. It's a real dogfight.